Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the standards evening for the 3rd of April. This meeting is being live streamed on YouTube, so do be aware of that, please. Are there any apologies for absence? I've got a note of Councillor Watson, but if there are no others? Thank you. And members, do we have any interest to declare? Thank you very much. Okay, I'll move on to agenda item 3. Are you happy with the minutes for the meeting held on the 21st of January 2025? Thank you very much. I'll just sign those. Okay, now on to our business. We have in front of us a new social media policy, so thank you for the working group's work on that. I'd just like to ask the Assistant Director for Legal and Democratic Services to introduce this report.
Thank you, Chair. This report is seeking the committee's endorsement of the social media policy for members. Members may recall that following a standards committee in June last year, a working group was set up to review and update the social media policy following after identifying that there was a trend in breaches on social media. The working group was set up to review the social media policy and identify any areas that needed to be included in the policy. The group consisted of Councillor Lillis, Councillor May, Councillor Watson, Councillor Gregg and Councillor Copsey, who was nominated as chair. Appended to this report is the new and updated social media policy for members to endorse and review. Thank you, Chair.
Members, you've all had the report to review. Are there any questions at this point? Can I just briefly ask a question? You said that we had identified this as a result of noting an increase in breaches. Can you just clarify if that was an increase in breaches of good behaviour on social media or whether it was an increase in complaints?
It's an increase in complaints based on member involvement on social media.
Okay, thank you. I just thought it was important to note that the findings there didn't necessarily support that we'd all misbehaved. Thank you. So with no questions... Oh, go ahead. Could you use your microphone, please, Mark?
Sorry. When we talk about councillors' use of social media and putting it simply, responding or creating posts on a subject which may be contentious or divisive or inflammatory or whatever, we actually, for every councillor, we're also a member of the public, aren't we? So what is our position in terms of responding or creating posts, not under the guise of a councillor, but as an individual, as a member of the public? Are we still bound in all elements of this code that's been proposed, or do we have some latitude as long as we don't make it clear or don't intimate during those posts that we're actually acting as a councillor? You could take that one for me.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Fuller, it will depend on degree, in fact, and what the complaint is about. It's not necessarily the case that if you identify yourself as a member of the public and commenting as a member of the public that you will be found to be acting in the capacity as a member of the public. It will depend on all the facts in relation to that complaint. So, for example, If it's a live issue and you're a member of the council and it is known that you are a councillor of the council, if it's live controversial issue, it can only be in the perception that you are commenting in your capacity as a councillor.
That seems to put us in a difficult situation, because we would have to make a judgment then at each time before we were able to respond or reply, or in fact create a post. We would have to make a judgment as to how that's likely to be received and whether that would impact us in terms of, basically going against the code or the process. I just find that a little bit difficult to get my head around, actually.
Yes, it is a grey area. However, Councillor, if you stick to facts and, for example, if you were commenting on a subject that was coming up for a decision and you do make those opinions and those, you could be found to be predetermined in a way. So that would be a breach of the code as a matter of fact. But it is difficult, but councillors can use social media to point out facts, and facts are facts. You can be firm, you can be polite, you can be courteous. Doesn't mean just because they disagree with your comment and just because they feel that you are too firm or too opinionated that equals a breach of the code. It is a matter of fact and degree, and depending on how the complaint, how the tone, I suppose, and the comments were made. I mean, it's very hard to give you an example right now.
I'm just wanted some clarification to understand that what this code is saying is that you are a councillor and therefore you're not a member of the public in your dealings in social media, because anything that we do with social media is likely to be viewed, or could be viewed, as from a councillor, regardless of the subject.
Well, yes, but we have a triage system for that reason in the complaints policy, in the arrangements for the code of conduct. Yeah, there's nothing I can do to stop those complaints. I will have to triage them as they come in. But it is a matter of fact degree, and as part of the process, you will have a chance to respond to the complaint, so I can see both sides of the story.
If I can just offer an observation, it's not something I do myself, but many councillors choose to have a personal account and a separate one where they only post their council business, which may provide a little separation, but I don't think it lets us sidestep the code that we sign up to completely.
Thank you, Chairman, for that advice. My practice up to now has been, if I'm replying to a post I only have one account on Facebook, which I visit occasionally. I just take the opportunity that if I'm replying on the basis of somebody has asked a question, like, why wasn't my grass cut this week? I will always append in the post, I will simply sign it off as Councillor Michael Fuller. But if I'm just responding, I don't do that. If I'm responding in another sense. So I'm using my own personal, I'm identifying myself as a councillor when it's to do with something that the council has an influence on. Anything else, I'm always just, I'm just me, really. But it's interesting that actually may not be a defence.
I would just add to that it may not be, but we also have to remember it's the perception of the public as well. So you may say you're acting in the capacity of a private resident, but it's the perception of the public also counts.
Okay, are there any other questions? Okay, that being the case, I move the recommendation at 3.1 of the report. Would somebody like to second that? Councillor Lillis, thank you. And could I have a show of hands of those in favour of adopting these standards? Thank you, that's unanimous. Okay, thank you. So moving to agenda item 5, the summary of complaints under the Council's Code of Conduct. Ms Law, can I ask you again to introduce the report?
Thank you, Chair. The Standards Committee is asked to receive the summary of complaints and determinations received in relation to members' behaviour under the Code of Conduct. There is a table appended to item 5 on page 3. The summary of complaints and determinations are from January 2025 to date. Members, I'm happy to take any questions.
Councillor Lillis.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'm not sure whether it's a question or an observation. We'll see where I get. But if you look at the Appendix 1, Row 2, we have a complaint against a borough councillor. I think it's important to note that there's been no breach of the code. However, the councillor, the member, as it describes it here, did issue an apology to the complainant. I mean, usually at this stage, and rightly so, the parties would remain anonymous. However, and I'm sure Angela will correct me if I'm out of line, I assume that this particular case, the complainant is Mr. Martin England. And the reason I say that is because I saw publication of an apology letter on social media. And I have to say I found that quite disappointing, to be honest with you, because the member wasn't found to be in breach of the Code of Conduct. He or she arguably had the good grace to issue an apology, and to see that then put onto social media, I personally don't think that was in the spirit in which it was attended. And to use the word again, I would hope that people would have the good grace to accept an apology and not feel the need to publish it. But that's all I wish to say, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, that's noted. Councillor Knott.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, it's probably a question for Angela, but it's just on the back of what Councillor Lillis has said there. It's making me think, if a letter is sent by a councillor to a resident and it's a private correspondence and it's on headed council notepaper or paper with the council logo, and that letter is then published by the recipient of the letter without the express consent of the sender, I in this case a councillor. I'm just wondering, or interested to know, is there any copyright offences? Because that is obviously a letter of the council in confidence being published publicly. Thank you.
There's no copyright offences. It would fall under the Freedom of Information Act, and that letter wouldn't be classed as exempt under the Freedom of Information Act if requested under that Act anyway. So for transparency purposes, we would, if it was requested, we probably would release it anyway.
Members, are there any other questions? Okay, thank you. In that case, can I ask if we are happy to note this report? Okay, thank you, everybody. That at record pace concludes our meeting tonight, so thank you very much for your time. The time is 19:14 as we close the meeting. Thank you.